My name is Julius Malema, and there is a story I have carried in silence for a long time. I have faced political battles, public criticism, and difficult decisions that kept me awake through many nights. I have spent years thinking about the future of Africa, wondering whether our continent would rise to fulfill its potential or continue struggling against division, poverty, and disappointment. Because of that journey, many people know me as a politician and an activist. Very few know about the experience I'm about to share. I am not a pastor. I do not claim to be a prophet. I do not pretend to possess special spiritual authority. Yet one night, after weeks of exhaustion and deep concern about the direction of our people, I experienced a dream that felt more real than anything I had ever known. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I was shaking. The images remained clear in my mind. The words I heard seemed impossible to forget. It felt as though I had stepped into another world and returned carrying a message that was not meant only for me. In that dream, I saw Jesus. He did not come to discuss politics. He did not come to support one side or condemn another. He came with a warning. What he showed me concerned Africa, the church across our continent, and millions of believers searching for hope in uncertain times. Today, I believe it is finally time to tell this story. The night began like many others during a difficult season of my life. For several weeks, I had been carrying a heavy burden in my mind. Everywhere I looked, I saw both promise and struggle across Africa. I saw young people filled with talent but lacking opportunities. I saw communities hoping for change while facing challenges that seemed larger than themselves. I saw leaders making decisions that would shape the future of millions. These thoughts followed me throughout the day and often stayed with me long after darkness fell. That particular evening, I felt completely exhausted. My body was tired, but my mind refused to rest. Questions about the future continued to circle through my thoughts. I wondered whether Africa would finally discover the unity needed to unlock its potential. I wondered whether faith would continue guiding people through uncertain times. Most of all, I wondered whether future generations would inherit a better continent than the one we had received. Eventually, fatigue overcame me. I fell asleep. What happened next did not feel like an ordinary dream. I found myself standing completely alone in a vast African plain. The landscape stretched farther than my eyes could see. There were no buildings, there were no roads, there were no signs of modern life. Only open land beneath an enormous sky. At first, the scene appeared peaceful. Then I noticed something unusual. Everything was silent. There were no birds singing in the distance. There was no sound of insects moving through the grass. There was no wind touching the earth. Even the air itself seemed motionless. The silence was so complete that it felt alive. As I stood there, I sensed that the entire landscape was waiting for something. It was as if heaven and earth had paused together for a single moment. The feeling became stronger with every passing second. I looked around, trying to understand why I was there. Nothing moved, nothing changed. Yet, deep inside, I knew that something significant was about to happen. Then I noticed a faint light appearing on the horizon. At first, it was small enough to be mistaken for a distant star, but unlike a star, it continued growing brighter. Slowly, steadily, it began moving toward me. I watched in complete amazement. The light did not flicker. It did not fade. It advanced with purpose. As it drew closer, the entire plain began to glow. The darkness retreated before it. Shadows disappeared. Every detail of the landscape became visible beneath its brightness. Yet strangely, the light did not hurt my eyes. Instead, it brought a feeling I struggle to describe even today. It was a mixture of peace and awe, comfort and seriousness, love and authority. The closer the light came, the more I realized that this was no ordinary event. I felt completely exposed, as though every thought I had ever carried was visible before that light. There was no place to hide, no excuses to offer, no image to protect. Only truth remained. Many people spend their lives trying to appear strong before others. Leaders often do the same. We learn how to defend ourselves. We learn how to argue. We learn how to project confidence. But standing there, none of those things mattered. I was simply a man, nothing more, nothing less. The light continued approaching until it dominated the horizon. At that moment, I felt something deep within my spirit. I sensed that what was coming had nothing to do with political power, wealth, influence, or public recognition. This was about something greater, something eternal, something that concerned not only my future, but the future of many others. The silence that filled the plain suddenly felt meaningful. It was not empty silence. It was the silence that comes before an important message is spoken. The silence that comes before history changes direction. The silence that comes before a person is forced to confront truth. As the brilliant light moved closer, I felt both anticipation and humility. I knew that whatever happened next would leave a permanent mark on my life. Even inside the dream, I understood that I would never forget this moment. The light was now only a short distance away. Its brightness surrounded everything. The vast plain seemed to disappear beneath its glory. And then, just as the light reached me, it stopped. What emerged from that light would become the most unforgettable experience of my entire life. Looking back now, I believe the lesson of that first moment was simple. Before people can receive guidance, they must first become still. Before nations can discover their future, they must be willing to listen. Before hearts can change, distractions must fade away. That silent plain reminded me that many of us spend our lives surrounded by noise. We are distracted by arguments, fear, ambition, and endless activity. Yet sometimes the most important truths arrive only when everything else becomes quiet. I did not know it then, but that silence was preparing me for a message that would challenge everything I thought I understood about leadership, faith, Africa, and myself. The light had arrived, and the one standing within it was about to speak. The brilliant light stopped only a few meters away from where I stood. For a moment, everything remained silent. The vast plain, the endless sky, and the glowing horizon seemed frozen in time. I could feel my heart pounding as I tried to understand what I was witnessing. Then, from within the light, a figure began to emerge. At first, I could only see a silhouette. Slowly, the image became clearer. Standing before me was a man clothed in white. The garment he wore seemed brighter than any fabric I had ever seen, yet the light surrounding him was even more extraordinary. It did not resemble sunlight, it did not resemble fire. It carried a purity unlike anything I had experienced. The closer I looked, the more overwhelmed I became. His face reflected perfect peace. There was no anger, there was no confusion, there was no fear. Yet within his eyes I saw a seriousness so profound that it pierced straight through me. It felt as though he could see every decision I had ever made, every success, every failure, every moment of courage, every moment of weakness. Nothing was hidden from him. At that instant, I understood that I was standing in the presence of someone far greater than any earthly leader. The feeling was impossible to ignore. I sensed overwhelming love flowing from him. At the same time, I felt a holiness that filled me with reverence. It was the kind of presence that makes a person aware of how small they truly are. Without thinking, I fell to my knees. Not because anyone forced me, not because I felt threatened. I knelt because it seemed like the only possible response. As I lowered my head, a deep peace settled over me. Then I heard his voice. He called me by name. Julius. The sound was gentle, yet it carried authority unlike anything I had ever heard. His voice seemed to echo through the sky, through the earth, and through my own spirit at the same time. When he spoke my name, I felt known completely. Not as a public figure, not as a politician, not as a leader, simply as a man, a human being standing before his creator. I slowly lifted my eyes toward him. The light around him continued shining across the plain. Then he spoke again. Julius, do not be afraid. Those words immediately calmed the fear that had been growing inside me. I listened carefully. I have not come to frighten you. The moment he said those words, I understood that this encounter was not meant to condemn me. It was meant to reveal something important. His gaze moved toward the horizon. Then he continued, I have come because Africa stands at a great crossroads. Those words immediately captured my attention. Throughout my life, I had spoken about Africa's future. I had debated policies. I had challenged leaders. I had discussed economics, justice, education, and development. But the way he spoke made me realize that this crossroads was deeper than politics. It involved the soul of a continent. It involved choices that would shape generations. I looked around the vast plain. The silence remained. The light continued surrounding us. Every word he spoke seemed to carry enormous weight. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to understand more. But I felt compelled to listen. Sometimes we spend so much time speaking that we forget how to hear. Standing there, I realized that listening was more important than talking. Jesus then raised his hand toward the sky. His expression became even more serious. Not harsh, not angry, simply serious. The way a loving father might look at his children when he knows an important decision lies ahead. Then he said something that remains engraved in my memory. What I am about to show you concerns more than your own future. His voice seemed to fill the entire horizon. It concerns nations. It concerns my church. It concerns millions who are searching for hope. As those words settled into my heart, I felt both humbled and burdened. I knew that whatever came next would not be a message intended only for me. It would carry significance far beyond my own life. The atmosphere around us seemed to change. The light became brighter. The sky above us appeared almost alive. I could sense that a revelation was about to unfold. Then Jesus looked directly into my eyes once more. His expression remained filled with compassion, but his voice carried urgency, a loving urgency, the kind that comes when time is precious, the kind that comes when people must pay attention. Then he gave me a simple instruction: look up. I followed his command immediately. I lifted my eyes toward the heavens. As I did, the sky began to transform. The blue expanse above me became like a living canvas. Images started appearing before my eyes, scenes unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Visions that seemed to reveal possible futures. Some filled with hope, others filled with sorrow. Some inspiring, others deeply troubling. I understood that these were not random images. Each one carried a message. Each one revealed a choice. Each one pointed toward a path that Africa could take. My attention remained fixed on the sky. I could feel my heart racing. The first vision was already beginning to appear, and what I saw next would fill me with hope for an Africa unlike any I had ever imagined. The moment I lifted my eyes toward the sky, the vision began. The heavens above me transformed into something I cannot fully explain. It was as though an invisible curtain had been pulled aside, allowing me to see events unfolding across the entire continent of Africa at once. At first, I saw faces, thousands of faces, then millions, men and women from every corner of Africa, young people filled with determination, mothers working to provide for their families, farmers cultivating the land, teachers standing before classrooms, doctors caring for the sick, entrepreneurs building businesses from simple ideas. The more I watched, the more I realized that this was not a vision of Africa's problems. It was a vision of Africa's potential. I saw young men and women refusing to believe that their future depended entirely on other nations. Instead of waiting for rescue, they began creating opportunities with their own hands. New businesses appeared in cities and villages. Factories opened. Technology centers emerged. Communities invested in local industries. The spirit of innovation spread across the continent. I watched as talented young Africans use their knowledge to solve problems that had challenged previous generations. Many of them faced obstacles, many encountered setbacks, yet they continued moving forward. What impressed me most was their confidence. For so long, many people had been taught to doubt Africa's abilities, yet in this vision, I saw a generation beginning to believe in itself. The scene expanded. I saw farmers working fertile land across vast regions of the continent. Fields stretched toward the horizon. Harvests grew stronger. Communities produced food not only for survival, but for prosperity. The land itself seemed alive with possibility. I thought about how often Africa's resources are discussed around the world. People speak about minerals. People speak about oil. People speak about strategic importance. But in this vision, I saw something even more valuable. I saw human potential. I saw people discovering the strength that had always existed within them. Then the vision changed again. I saw schools, new schools appearing in places where children once had few opportunities, classrooms filled with students eager to learn, libraries expanding, universities growing, knowledge spreading across communities. The faces of the children stood out to me. They were not studying merely to escape Africa. They were studying to build Africa. That distinction struck me deeply. For generations, many of the continent's brightest minds believed success required leaving home. In this vision, I saw something different. I saw people investing their talents where they were most needed. The future was being built from within. As the images continued unfolding, hospitals appeared across the landscape, medical centers expanded, healthcare reached communities that had once been neglected, families received care, children received treatment, lives were being saved. The vision showed progress that was practical, meaningful, and life-changing. This was not a fantasy. This was not an impossible dream. It looked like a future that could become reality if people chose unity, responsibility, and determination. Then I noticed another remarkable change. National flags began appearing throughout the vision. I saw the flags of many African nations waving proudly, yet something was different. They were not competing against one another. They stood together, distinct, independent, yet united by a shared purpose. Countries cooperated, leaders communicated, partnerships formed. Instead of constant rivalry, I saw collaboration. Instead of endless suspicion, I saw mutual respect. The image moved me deeply. Throughout history, division has often weakened people who possess tremendous strength. In this vision, I saw the opposite. I saw strength multiplied through cooperation. As I watched, Jesus spoke beside me. His voice remained calm, yet every word carried authority. I have given Africa resources. The vision brightened. I have given Africa strength. The faces of millions appeared before me. I have given Africa gifted people. I continued watching as communities prospered. Then he paused. The next words seemed to echo across the entire continent. But they must learn to believe in what I have already placed within them. Those words touched me profoundly because many of Africa's greatest struggles are not only economic or political. Sometimes the greatest struggle is believing that change is possible, believing that the future can be different, believing that ordinary people possess extraordinary value. As the vision continued, I realized that hope itself was becoming visible, not the kind of hope built on empty promises, not the kind of hope that depends entirely upon one leader. A deeper hope, a hope rooted in faith, responsibility, hard work, and unity. I saw communities helping one another. I saw families becoming stronger. I saw young people choosing purpose over despair. I saw nations discovering confidence without arrogance. The more I watched, the more I felt encouraged. For a brief moment, all the discouraging headlines that often dominate conversations about Africa seemed distant. What stood before me was a reminder that the story of Africa is not finished. The future remains unwritten. The possibilities remain enormous. Then Jesus looked toward the vision and spoke once more. His voice carried both encouragement and warning, because every opportunity also comes with a choice. Every promise requires responsibility. Every blessing must be protected. As I continued watching, I understood that this hopeful future was not guaranteed. It depended upon decisions. It depended upon character. It depended upon whether people would choose unity over division and purpose over selfish ambition. The vision remained beautiful, yet I sensed that another image was about to appear, one very different from the first. The brightness of the scene began to fade. The joyful images started disappearing. A shadow moved across the sky, and what came next revealed a future that filled my heart with sorrow. As the brightness of the first vision faded, a heavy feeling settled over the plain. The hope I had just witnessed began disappearing from the sky. The images of cooperation, progress, and unity slowly dissolved into darkness. A shadow spread across the horizon. I immediately sensed that what I was about to see would be very different. The atmosphere changed. The peace that had filled the vision gave way to tension. I looked upward and saw another future unfolding before me. At first, I noticed leaders standing on platforms, speaking passionately to crowds. But instead of bringing people together, their words created deeper divisions. Arguments replaced cooperation. Suspicion replaced trust. The desire for power became stronger than the desire to serve. As the vision expanded, I saw nations turning against one another. Governments competed relentlessly for influence. All disagreements grew larger. New conflicts emerged. The energy that could have been used to build prosperity was being wasted on rivalry. The sight troubled me deeply. Africa possesses enormous potential when its people work together. Yet in this vision, I saw that same strength being weakened by division. The scene shifted again. I saw communities fractured from within. Neighbors who once lived peacefully together now viewed one another with suspicion. Groups that should have been united by common goals became separated by ethnic tensions, political loyalties, and bitterness. The divisions seemed endless. People stopped listening. They stopped understanding one another. Many became convinced that those who disagreed with them were enemies. I watched as anger spread faster than wisdom. The vision became increasingly painful. Throughout history, countless nations have suffered because internal conflicts destroyed opportunities that should have benefited everyone. As I observed the vision, I realized that no outside force was creating this destruction. The damage was coming from within. That realization made the scene even more heartbreaking. Then I saw fires, small at first, scattered across different regions, but they did not remain small. They multiplied. More fires appeared. Then even more. Soon, flames were visible throughout the continent. Some represented violence, some represented hatred, some represented greed, others represented corruption, and the pursuit of power at any cost. The exact meaning of each fire seemed different, yet together they created the same result: destruction. I watched as cities became overwhelmed by unrest. People ran through crowded streets filled with confusion. Fear spread rapidly. Trust disappeared. The institutions that should have protected communities struggled under the weight of constant conflict. The scene felt chaotic, not because Africa lacked strength, but because its strength had been turned against itself. I felt a deep sadness growing inside me, because many of the faces I saw were ordinary people, families, workers, students, children, people who simply wanted peace and opportunity. Yet they were suffering because division had become more powerful than unity. At that moment, Jesus spoke again. His voice cut through the darkness surrounding the vision. Killing one another will never build the future. The words echoed across the sky. I continued watching. The fires burned. The divisions deepened. The suffering increased. Then Jesus spoke once more. This time his voice carried a solemn warning. The enemy cannot defeat Africa from the outside if Africans do not destroy one another from within. The moment I heard those words, the entire vision suddenly made sense. For years, discussions about Africa often focus on external challenges: foreign influence, global competition, economic pressures, historical injustices. These realities certainly exist. But what I saw in this vision revealed something equally important. No continent can reach its full potential if it is consumed by internal hatred. No nation can prosper if its people spend more energy fighting each other than building together. No community can move forward if distrust becomes stronger than hope. The words remained in my mind. The enemy cannot defeat Africa from the outside if Africans do not destroy one another from within. I realized this warning was not directed only at leaders. It was directed at everyone: citizens, families, communities, churches, organizations. Every person has a choice to contribute to healing or to contribute to division. As the vision continued, I saw examples of both paths. Some people chose forgiveness, others chose revenge. Some chose understanding, others chose hostility. The future seemed to be shaped by countless individual decisions. That realization humbled me, because it reminded me that the destiny of a nation is not determined solely by presidents, ministers, or political movements. It is also shaped by ordinary people and the values they choose to live by every day. Then the darkness became even deeper. For a moment, the fires appeared larger than the hope I had witnessed earlier. The suffering seemed overwhelming. I wondered whether this vision represented an unavoidable future. I wondered whether the continent could escape such a path. But before fear could fully take hold, I noticed something remarkable. Far beyond the darkness, I saw a small light, then another, and another. They appeared in different places across the continent. Tiny points of light shining through the shadows. At first they seemed insignificant, yet they continued growing. The darkness could not extinguish them. Instead, they became brighter. I did not yet understand what they represented, but I sensed that they were important. The fires of division were powerful, yet this light seemed stronger. Hope had not disappeared. Faith had not disappeared. The possibility of renewal still remained. Jesus remained silent for a moment as I watched. Then he looked toward those lights. A calm expression returned to his face. I sensed that another vision was about to begin, one that would reveal why those lights continued shining despite the darkness. The fires slowly faded. The chaos began disappearing. The shadows retreated. And before my eyes, a new scene started emerging. It was a vision unlike anything I had seen before. A vision not centered on politics, economics, or power. A vision centered on faith. a vision that revealed what could happen when hearts returned to God. And what I saw next filled me with a hope even greater than the hope of the first vision. As the darkness faded from the second vision, the small lights I had noticed began growing brighter. They appeared in villages. They appeared in cities. They appeared in places rich and poor. At first, they seemed scattered and disconnected. But as I continued watching, I realized they were all connected by something deeper. They represented people seeking God. The sky above me transformed once again. The fires of conflict disappeared. The sounds of chaos vanished. In their place came something entirely different. I heard voices praying, thousands of voices, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. The sound spread across the continent like a rising river. It was not the sound of fear. It was not the sound of political slogans. It was the sound of people calling upon God with sincere hearts. I watched as churches filled with worshippers. Some buildings were large, others were small. Some met in cities. Others gathered beneath simple roofs in rural communities. Yet the location did not seem important. What mattered was what was happening inside those hearts. People were praying with genuine faith. People were seeking truth. People were turning toward God. The atmosphere of the vision became filled with hope. Then I noticed something remarkable. Many of those gathering were young people, young men, young women, students, workers, individuals who had grown up surrounded by uncertainty and confusion. Instead of surrendering to despair, they were searching for something greater than themselves. They were searching for God. Their sight moved me deeply. Throughout history, every generation has faced its own challenges. Many people often worry about the future of young people. Yet in this vision, I saw an entire generation discovering faith for itself, not because someone forced them, not because it was fashionable, but because they genuinely desired truth. The vision expanded further. I saw families being restored. Relationships that had been damaged for years were being healed. Parents and children embraced one another. Brothers reconciled, sisters forgave. Old wounds that seemed impossible to heal began disappearing. The power of forgiveness was transforming lives. I realized that true revival was not merely about filling church buildings. It was about changing hearts. A nation cannot be transformed if hearts remain unchanged. Communities cannot experience lasting peace if bitterness continues controlling people. In this vision, I saw something deeper than religious activity. I saw spiritual renewal. Then the scene shifted again. I noticed communities that had once been divided, groups that had spent years distrusting one another, people separated by political disagreements, people separated by ethnic differences, people separated by old conflicts. Yet now they were standing together. They prayed together. They worshipped together. They worked together. The divisions that had seemed so powerful in the previous vision were losing their influence. Forgiveness was accomplishing what anger never could. Unity was achieving what conflict never would. The more I watched, the more the light spread. It moved from village to village, from city to city, from nation to nation. The entire continent seemed illuminated by a spiritual awakening. It was not a light produced by governments. It was not a light produced by wealth. It was not a light produced by human power. It came from transformed lives. I could feel hope growing stronger with every moment. Then I heard singing. At first it sounded distant, but quickly it became impossible to ignore. Millions of voices were praising God together, different languages, different cultures, different nations, yet one purpose, one faith, one source of hope. The sound was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It carried joy. It carried gratitude. It carried faith. The praise rose across the continent like a mighty wave. I stood there overwhelmed by what I was witnessing. The revival was not limited to one denomination. It was not limited to one region. It was not limited to one group of people. It touched every corner of Africa. It crossed borders. It crossed cultures. It crossed generations. And wherever it spread, lives changed. The more I watched, the more I understood that this revival was not simply about religion. It was about transformation. Communities became stronger. Families became healthier. People discovered purpose. Hope replaced despair. Faith replaced fear. Then Jesus spoke beside me. His voice was calm, yet filled with certainty. A great revival is coming. I listened carefully. The vision continued unfolding before my eyes. The light kept spreading. The voices of worship continued rising. Then he added words that immediately captured my attention. But it belongs only to those who seek me with all their hearts. The moment I heard those words, I understood something important. This revival was not automatic. It was not guaranteed simply because people call themselves believers. It required sincerity. It required humility. It required a genuine desire to know God. Many people seek blessings. Many people seek success. Many people seek solutions to problems. But Jesus was speaking about something deeper. He was speaking about people who seek Him, people willing to place truth above convenience, people willing to choose faith over pride, people willing to surrender their hearts rather than simply perform religious rituals. As I reflected on His words, the vision became even brighter. I realized that the future of Africa would not be determined solely by economics, politics, or institutions. Those things matter, but they are not enough on their own. The strength of any society ultimately depends upon the condition of its people, and the condition of people depends greatly upon the condition of their hearts. The revival I was witnessing offered hope that no government program could create and no political movement could fully achieve. It was a renewal that began within individuals and spread outward into families, communities, and nations. As the vision reached its peak, the entire continent appeared covered in light. The darkness from the previous vision seemed powerless before it. The fires of division had disappeared. The voices of hatred had grown silent. Faith, hope, and reconciliation were now shaping the future. For a moment, I felt overwhelming joy. Yet I sensed that Jesus was not finished speaking. There was still a message He needed to deliver. A message more personal than anything He had shown me so far. The light remained bright around us. The revival continued shining across the horizon. Then Jesus turned toward me. His expression became serious once again. I knew another lesson was coming, not merely for Africa, not merely for the church, but for me personally. And what He said next would become one of the most important warnings of my entire life. As the vision of revival continued shining across the continent, Jesus turned toward me. The joy I had felt while watching millions of people worship God was still present. Yet I immediately sensed that what He was about to say carried tremendous importance. His expression was filled with love, but it was also filled with seriousness. The kind of seriousness that comes when someone is speaking about dangers that must not be ignored. The light around us remained bright. The vision of revival continued in the distance. Then Jesus spoke. The first warning was directed toward Africa's relationship with leadership. His voice was calm, yet every word carried weight. Many people are placing their hope in human beings more than in God. The moment He said those words, I felt convicted. Throughout history, people have often searched for a single individual who could solve every problem: a president, a political movement, a revolutionary figure, a famous leader. Many people long for a savior they can see, someone who appears strong enough to carry all their hopes and dreams. But Jesus made it clear that this desire can become dangerous. I watched as images appeared before us. Crowds gathered around influential leaders. Some of those leaders began with sincere intentions. Some genuinely wanted to help their people. But over time, many followers started treating those leaders as though they were beyond criticism, as though they possessed all the answers, as though the future depended entirely upon them. The result was disappointment, because no human being is perfect. No president is perfect. No activist is perfect. No pastor is perfect. No leader can carry the weight that belongs only to God. Then Jesus spoke again. No man can save Africa. The words echoed across the plain. Only God is the source of true hope. I understood immediately. Leadership matters. Good leaders matter. Responsible leadership can improve countless lives. But when people place absolute faith in human beings, they create expectations that no person can fulfill. The warning was not against leadership. It was against idolatry. It was against replacing trust in God with trust in personalities. As I reflected on those words, I realized how easily this can happen. People become desperate for solutions. They become frustrated by problems. Then they begin believing that one person alone will rescue them. Jesus was warning that such thinking leads to disappointment. Faith must remain anchored in something greater than any individual. Then the vision shifted. The second warning appeared. This time it concerned the church. The atmosphere changed. I saw churches filled with people. Large crowds gathered. Beautiful buildings stood across cities and towns. At first, everything appeared encouraging, but then deeper realities became visible. I saw some leaders pursuing wealth more than truth. I saw some seeking popularity more than faithfulness. I saw ministries becoming more concerned with influence than with serving God. The sight troubled me, because alongside many sincere believers, there were also people using the name of God for personal gain. Jesus looked toward the vision. His voice carried sorrow. Many will speak about me. The crowds continued growing, but they will not live according to my truth. The words pierced my heart, because the warning was not directed only at a few individuals. It was a warning for everyone. Faith can never survive on appearances alone. People can speak beautifully. They can attract crowds. They can gain influence, yet still drift away from the truth. I saw churches becoming distracted by money, others becoming distracted by status, others becoming distracted by political power. The gospel itself was sometimes pushed into the background. Then Jesus spoke again. My people must return to truth. The vision became still. My people must return to repentance. The seriousness of his words filled the air. I understood that genuine revival requires more than excitement. It requires honesty. It requires humility. It requires people willing to examine their own hearts. The church cannot change the world if it becomes indistinguishable from the world. The church must remain rooted in truth. That was the warning, and it was a warning that deserved careful attention. Then everything became quiet. The visions faded. The crowds disappeared. The churches vanished. For the first time since the encounter began, Jesus focused entirely on me. There were no other images, no distractions, only his gaze. I immediately sensed that the third warning would be deeply personal. His eyes met mine. I felt exposed once again, not condemned, not rejected, simply seen completely. Then he spoke my name, Julius. His voice was gentle, yet it carried undeniable authority. If you desire to serve your people, remember this. I listened carefully because I knew these words were meant specifically for me. Power is one of the greatest tests of the human soul. The statement struck me immediately. Throughout my life, I had witnessed what power can do to people. I had seen individuals begin their journeys with noble intentions. I had seen leaders who genuinely wanted to help others, yet power often changes people, sometimes slowly, sometimes almost unnoticed. Pride begins to grow. Humility begins to fade. The desire to serve becomes the desire to control. The mission becomes less important than personal recognition. Jesus continued speaking. No one is immune to temptation. His words carried neither accusation nor anger, only truth. I realized he was reminding me that every human being remains vulnerable. No matter how strong, no matter how respected, no matter how experienced, the temptation of fame, the temptation of influence, the temptation of believing one's own importance, these dangers never disappear completely. Then Jesus gave me words I have never forgotten. You are a servant, not a savior. The moment he said those words, something inside me changed. The burden many leaders carry often comes from believing they must personally solve everything. But no leader was ever meant to replace God. No leader was ever meant to become the center of hope. Our responsibility is to serve faithfully, to act justly, to help where we can, and to remember our limitations. I stood silently as his words settled into my heart. The warning was clear. If I ever forgot that I was a servant, power could become a trap. If I ever believed that public praise made me greater than others, pride could destroy everything good. Humility was not weakness. Humility was protection. As the final warning ended, a deep silence returned to the plain. The light surrounding Jesus remained brilliant. Yet I sensed our encounter was drawing to a close. The lessons he had shown me about Africa, the church, leadership, faith, and humility would remain with me forever. Then the light around him began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. And I realized he was preparing to speak his final words before the dream came to an end. The light surrounding Jesus slowly began to fade. The vast plain that had seemed so alive with visions and revelations became quiet once again. Yet before the light disappeared completely, Jesus spoke one final time. His voice was calm, but it carried an urgency I have never forgotten. Tell them that time is not as abundant as they think. I listened carefully. Prepare your hearts. The light continued fading. Seek me while you still can. Those were the final words I heard. Then everything vanished. The plain disappeared. The visions disappeared. The light disappeared. And I suddenly awoke. When I opened my eyes, tears were running down my face. For several moments, I sat in silence. The dream felt more real than any dream I had ever experienced. The images remained vivid. The warnings remained clear. The lessons remained impossible to ignore. From that day forward, I never looked at Africa's future the same way again. I understood that our greatest battles are not only political or economic. They are also spiritual and moral. The future of any nation depends not only on its resources or institutions, but also on the character of its people. After all of this, I have come to understand that no power lasts if it does not serve the people. Wealth, position, and fame cannot bring dignity to a nation if its citizens continue to live in injustice, poverty, and division. The world today faces too many conflicts, inequalities, and forms of suffering. I pray for a better future for South Africa, for the people of the United States, and for everyone around the world who longs for peace and justice. Let us reject selfishness and uncontrolled greed. Let us stand against injustice, oppression, and every force that seeks to divide human beings. Let us build societies founded upon respect, unity, compassion, responsibility, and care for future generations. No matter how difficult the road becomes, do not lose hope in the future. Every nation possesses the power to change its destiny when its people unite around what is right and just. Africa can rise. Justice can prevail. Hope can belong to those who refuse to surrender. And if this story has touched your heart in any way, I invite you to leave a message of encouragement and continue walking with us as we spread hope, faith, unity, and compassion to more people around the world. Thank you for listening to my story. May God bless you, your family, and the generations that come after you.